The top streamed episodes are always the stories from the other side. And we have another beautiful stories from the other side today. I'm excited for you to meet our guest, to learn from her, and hopefully take away some inspiration. So let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and today I have Claudia Porter with us. So Claudia is a financial advisor and fellow divorcee, here to talk a little bit about her story. So welcome, Claudia. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Erica. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, because she is a financial advisor, I do have a little bit of a disclosure statement we need to read at the beginning and the end. So let me just get this whole legal jargon out of the way first, and then we'll dive into talking about your story and learning about who you are. So, discussions in this podcast should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. We are here to talk to Claudia not about financial advising, but about sharing her story of how she made it through, how she made it to the other side, and what she learned along the way. So, Claudia, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So my marriage struggles began when my ex-husband and I had three boys under the age of 3.5 and a fourth boy on the way.
It's a
So
lot.
I'd
That's a
been
lot of
dealing,
boys. I
yes,
feel you.
that's a lot of boys.
I got four boys, three step boys and a boy. That's a lot of boys in the house.
Yeah, I had been dealing with intense sleep deprivation while the boys were little. And even though we had hired help, I was completely exhausted and in survival mode in those early years of our marriage. And my husband was in control of all the finances. I was never allowed to participate in a meeting with a family financial advisor. I felt I could never do anything right. It was just a moving target, no matter how much I tried to please. And our marital problems resulted in us going to several different therapists over the course of time, but we never got anywhere. And I had been raised with values of loyalty, integrity, and a deeply ingrained belief that I owed my children a home with two parents and that problems had to be worked out. So during the pregnancy with our fourth boy, our marriage kept deteriorating to the point where I realized this wasn't a good relationship model for my boys.
Yeah.
And not knowing what my marriage and divorce rights even were, I started talking to friends and former colleagues and journaled every night to put some distance between me and what was actually happening. And rereading some of my entries and reading books that were recommended to me by friends gave me clarity of what I was actually dealing with.
Yeah.
And in fact, in one couples therapy session, my husband at the time brought up a prenuptial agreement that he had me sign when we were still dating, and that he had presented as a pro forma thing that people in the US sign before they get married. So, mind you, I'm not from here. I was born and raised in Germany. I had asked questions about it at the time when no proposal had been made, and I was told it was just to reassure him that I was not in the relationship for his money. And with no lawyer present during a surprise visit to the bank to sign it, I made it clear I had no idea what this was all about. And then later in the couples therapy session, he said that he had made sure with this agreement that I could never divorce him because if I dared to, I would be homeless and penniless. So I was freaked out and I called a close friend and she advised me to find a document and take it to an attorney. So after a 2-hour search, I found it in the basement in a folder with my name on it and reread it with 8 more years of English. And I understood then that I had the right to have it explained to me by an attorney. I had no idea what my marriage and divorce rights were, and I didn't know where to even begin. So several friends gave me attorney names, and I consulted with a couple of different ones. The first one I spoke with said he wouldn't touch the case because Oregon likes to uphold prenuptial agreements. And since my name wasn't on the title of the house and I would get no support, I would be living in the jointly owned van with the kids because I couldn't even afford to rent a house with what I would get. I was in disbelief and intense fear crept in. I had no idea this could be a possible scenario. I couldn't possibly stay in this marriage, but I also didn't see a way out because I didn't want to give up my kids nor raise them on the street. So I decided to talk to other mothers at my kids' school. And one mother Googled some information for me. And on the top of the page, it had the name of an attorney on it that I took as a divine sign because his name had a biblical meaning in German. And since I had taught only sporadically while the kids were young, just to keep my foot in the door, so I was previously a professor of linguistics, I had no savings to retain an attorney. I received a monthly check from my husband for groceries, the household, and kids, and my integrity forbade me to shave off money for legal expenses. So I needed time to figure this out. And so what I did is I thwarted any threats directed at me by saying I was just going to focus on myself and would do anything I could do to improve myself to save the relationship. So at that point, I was just trying to gain time to figure out my exit. And I had started documenting things that were said and done, but things got more intense. And I bought a recording device to keep a record of things. And then one day I was given an ultimatum of 3 days to decide if I was still committed to saving the relationship. It was a 1.5 hour conversation and it was recorded on his recording device. And then I asked to listen to the recording later by myself to understand what I had been asked to do, but then secretly recorded the conversation from his device to mine and dropped the tape off at this attorney's office that I had spoken to. And a couple hours later, he called me and said, "You need to get out ASAP." And I remember looking at my diamond wedding ring, thinking, I don't know why I'm still wearing it. It's totally lost its meaning. And then I had an idea. I took the wedding ring to a local diamond store, had it appraised, and I had synthetic stones made that looked identical to my ring. And 3 weeks later, the stones were switched out, and I sold the original stones for an amount that allowed me to retain the attorney I'd spoken with. And the attorney got the check the next day, and the divorce papers were delivered 10 days later. I had no idea how this would all pan out, but I decided to just hand this all over to God from this point on.
I think that there are so many really key moments to highlight in that story. And I think that so many listeners can relate to it. We don't know what we don't know. Most of us, this is our first divorce. We have no idea what our legal rights are, how to start the process. And you're really in a relationship with somebody who was your main trustworthy source, right? It
Right.
was the person that was the rock for so many years. And sometimes it's not trustworthy anymore. And that's a really hard
Right.
thing. I was reading an article or something about women. Why do women stay so long in marriages when they know that it's not good? And you had said something to this effect, hey, I was taught that you don't give up. And I was taught, like, is this really as bad as it's going to get? And maybe we can do something and maybe this can get better. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
article talked a little bit about how women challenge themselves to be able to accept less because there are rough spots. There are low spots in any relationship. And so, as the woman who's holding it together, we challenge ourselves to say, okay, can I make it through this low spot to have it come back? And when it doesn't come back, when the low spot gets lower and lower, we have created these stories in our head that, oh, it's going to get better. Oh, it's just around the corner. And when we take a step back and look at the big picture, how far have we really deviated from the initial agreement? So, educating yourself. I love that you had so many mom friends. The mom
Yeah.
friends were doing the research. If you're not able to do the research because it's not a safe thing, people message in and they're like, I can't follow you because he'll see that I'm following your account, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a reality for some people. So who can help? And then again, finding the right lawyer. There are lots of lawyers
Yeah.
out there. They're not always the right fit for the right case. So thank you
Right.
for sharing all of that as a lot and the creativity of that diamond ring, right?
Yeah.
Was it hard or were you ready to let the ring go?
I was ready to let the ring go. I was just so afraid of taking that first step because I didn't know what would happen.
Yeah.
Like, okay, now he's going to get the papers. What's going to happen next?
What's
I
going to
was
happen
really
next?
afraid of that step,
Yeah.
but I was so ready to let go of it. I just wanted to get out.
Yeah.
And so I just put it into God's hands because I didn't know what was going to happen. I was very afraid,
Yeah.
but I knew I had to get out.
Yeah. What would you say are some of your like biggest struggles? What did you really struggle with?
Well, I struggled with different things in different stages. So during the time leading up to figuring out how to retain my attorney, I struggled with how to even come up with the funds to retain him. Right. And I was really grateful that I had the diamond ring and that I had this idea to sell it, or at least the stones, not the ring. And then after I filed, I was asked to stay in the marital home until divorce proceedings would start and a decision was made around when a move was possible. This was very challenging because I stayed for another year in the home and was met regularly with threats about ending up on the street and being penniless. And I documented everything and just trusted that God would put it right.
I'm going to jump in real quick though to say documentation is so key. Whether you're in the process or thinking about the process or it's after the process, even when you're just looking at was the other parent late to pick up? Did they deliver on what they were supposed to? Because you don't remember it. There's so much other intensity and trauma and triggers and things going on that just get a notebook that's just for that and just document the facts, just the facts of what was going on or what was said.
So when I was allowed to move out with the children, the court ordered support payments so that I could pay rent, and my husband was ordered to pay for childcare. So the struggle with this was that I had to send an email to my husband each week with weekly hours that had to be paid for childcare. And then the nanny had to go to him for a paycheck. And this dependence was very stressful because I had to have these weekly interactions with him to ask for pay for childcare. However, the court ordered childcare helped me continue teaching online classes, which I had taken back up around the time I filed for divorce to earn a small paycheck while this was all pending. But the big fear remained about whether I would actually get support, how I would find a full time position that would allow me to earn enough money to feed my family and raise the boys and pay for childcare. It was overwhelming. And then again, with going back to the documentation, the requirements for to document all events, email exchanges, phone conversations between us for the trial, participating in a lengthy parenting study while also shielding the kids from it all, and trying to be the best parent I could possibly be. I still sent out applications to every open position in my field and just hope for the best. But it was an overwhelming time.
Absolutely. There's so many pieces. A lot of times we don't know how to get through it. I think there are other women listening out there, right? When you hear this level of struggle in being able to move forward, the beauty in knowing that you did make it through, in the moment, I'm sure you felt like this was never ending and this was
Yeah.
hopeless. You were never going to get out of his control. I mean, he was still controlling you. Please let the courts change a little bit, but somehow they think that two people who couldn't communicate while they were married can somehow continue to figure out how to peacefully communicate after. At what point, he still has the control. And so I think this is really powerful for those women who do feel absolutely and completely hopeless and powerless in their situation. It is about finding the small things. You picked up a couple extra classes, right? You went
Mm-hmm.
week by week. You documented the data, the details so that the patterns could be found. And it's literally
Yeah.
one day at a time. I mean, you can't think about
Yeah.
2 years down the road. You're like, what do I need to do today? And all of a sudden
Yeah.
that becomes a week and a month and 6 months.
That's the only way to go about it. And then just, the uncertainty. I didn't know what the judge would rule about the prenuptial agreement. And I
Yeah.
felt totally overwhelmed. And I decided to just keep my faith that justice would prevail in the end. And ultimately, the judge threw out the prenuptial agreement based on a lack of meeting of the minds. No explanation had been made by an attorney. And it was also considered unconscionable. So this ruling was in my favor, but it made things more tense between us. So there were 3 court hearings about the prenuptial agreement, and then they were followed by about 10 court hearings for the divorce proceedings. And during this time, I received some support to rent and pay for childcare to start rebuilding my career. And so I felt relief that I didn't have to ask each week for money to pay the nanny, but my money worries continued to revolve around how I would possibly find a full position in my field and in the Portland area because I had to stay in the Portland area. So I just randomly started sending out applications for positions further away because there weren't any positions in my field locally. And 2 years later, the court ruled in my favor, awarding me full custody since I had been the primary caretaker. And I got a small percentage of my ex-husband's assets for a settlement and spousal support for 8 years. So with this, I would be able to buy a home to raise the children and have 8 years to get my career up to speed to where I could be self-sufficient. I was to stay in the Portland area and find employment locally to ensure visitation rights for my ex-husband. My ex-husband, however, decided to appeal all the finances and first to the Oregon Court of Appeals, who affirmed the trial court ruling 3 years later, and then all the way to the Supreme Court of Oregon, who affirmed the case another year later. So support was paying out during this time, like it ran and paid for childcare, but really it took 6 years from the time I filed for divorce until I finally received the settlement. And during the 4 years of appeal, I found it extremely difficult to find employment with which I could earn an income to provide for a 5-person household. The only linguistics position in town I found was at a local hospital. And after 1 year, my boss let me go with a note saying that I was working too fast and too efficiently and making her look bad. So fear of survival crept in again. And I wonder what else I might do as I felt the door to academia just had completely closed on me. And I started talking to friends and was advised to start going to a local Rotary Club where I connected with people. And I was invited to work as an intern at a local wealth management firm. So I felt like I had nothing to lose. I decided to give this a try and instantly fell in love with the industry. In fact, it brought me back to my passion after high school of becoming a financial advisor, and only didn't pursue it at the time because men talked me out of entering an industry that was for men and not meant for women, or so they thought.
Yeah.
So during this internship, I managed to leverage myself for about 6 months without a salary and lived on the support I was getting. But I realized as my bills kept piling up that I needed to find a position that would pay a base salary and give me a chance to learn the business. I was determined I was going to make it in this industry and use my experience for good and help others make good decisions about money, help couples talk about their money so that their relationships would have a better chance of lasting.
No.
And fast forward to today, I'm now a financial planner. I'm doing exactly what I always wanted to do. I'm financially independent, and I still have to do some catch up to do on my long-term savings and investments from the lost time during my time as a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
But I just love being able to help clients by educating them and empowering them to make sound financial decisions. This is what gets me up every day.
I love that. And it's important to note, you guys, this was years, years. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Even if you're divorced, my divorce moved very quickly through the courts. We wrote our own agreements, it was processed. And even my lawyer was like, well, it'll take a while for it to, be entered. And I think literally like a week or two later, we got like the stamp and she's like, this is unheard of. So mine was very fast. Yours had a lot of battles and uphill pieces. And it's this reminder that no matter if the actual proceedings were fast or slow, it still is a long process. I had a job, but it still rocked me financially. I still felt insecure about those pieces. And so hearing your steps, right? One step at a time, like how wonderful is it to look back on something that's very challenging and see all the places where there was those little divine interventions, right? Somebody brought you here, and I'm sure the decision to leave your first career, right? The academia was very hard, but then look what came from it. And sometimes we look at this divorce and we sit here and we say, well, how am I ever going to pay for it? And oh my God, I'm going to have to start over and all these pieces. You are. And it can bring something even more amazing. And having the plan, yeah, short term, great. When you shared you were living off the support you were getting, right? And you were able to pay the bills, but the debt was racking up. Okay, that's a choice that we make. I'm going to live with a little bit of debt, knowing that I'm going to further myself to pay it off. It doesn't always have to stay when it comes to those pieces, but how do we continue to chip away at it? If you throw up your hands and you're like, I'm never getting out and I'm never having the money and I'm never having the job, you shut down to the ways that those little divine interventions can show up. A random conversation from somebody who all of a sudden you're like, huh, I wonder about going to apply at this other place or starting a new career. And it can really bring you to exactly where you're supposed to be. If you've been struggling to find the right support to help you figure out what your next step is, the club is your answer. Launching this summer, we'll be hosting a private divorce group for you to get the support, the inspiration, and the guidance you need to be able to find the answers for you to finally move forward. No matter if you are unhappily married, trying to figure out what those next steps are, or in those early phases of separation and divorce where it feels like a constant uphill battle and you just want to get your feet underneath you, the club is going to be your place. Every single month, I offer support calls, networking calls to meet other women, and a signature program to guide you from confusion to clarity. On top of that, my most favorite part is every quarter, I'm going to send you a healing gift. You get a kit full of tools, support items, things to help you on your healing journey. The club is going to open up this summer, so make sure to get on the wait list. The link is in the show notes so that you have early access. So you've already shared a lot of really profound aha statements and shifts, but do you have any other advice? Somebody who's considering a divorce, but maybe is afraid because of finances, what would you say to them?
So my advice is that once you know you cannot stay in a relationship, find a resource that you can use to retain an attorney. You're going to need adequate representation. I used my diamond wedding ring to get the funds that I needed to retain an attorney, and I would advise to just be resourceful about what you can use to get the funds that you need. If the only reason you're staying in a relationship is the fear of not having enough money, the relationship's going to fall apart anyway at some point. And the older you become, the more difficult it is to build something for yourself and to become independent. It's extremely challenging to take a leap of faith and exit a marriage when you don't know how to survive financially, especially if young kids are involved. You will you will need temporary support to build or rebuild your career, but if you know you have to get out, you need to plan for it. There's no point in staying. And when contemplating a divorce, our emotions tend to send us into victim mode, and we question why this is happening to us. And it's really important to move away from the victim mentality because, when we can look at this as happening for us, then we can shed this fear and step forward into a better path. And as terrible as it may feel in the moment, when we find ourselves in this phase of questioning, we're called to move beyond our current state and figure out how we can get ourselves into a better place.
Yeah.
Nobody likes uncertainty. It's scary. It was really scary for me. It's hard to shield our children from what's going on when we're not able to take care of our own emotions in the moment, but we're not doing our kids nor ourselves a favor when we stay in a constant state of unhappiness. Yeah. If you don't have any savings and you're not employed, then create a plan of how you can earn money that you can put aside and save. Build a network of friends and professional acquaintances. This will help you find employment much more easily. Talk to a trusted friend or an advisor who's gone through this before. Consult with an attorney to learn what all you need to do in preparation of your exit and what the post-divorce scenario might look like. Learn about your marriage and divorce rights. If you don't know what the outcome is going to be, having an approximate idea reduces the amount of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And then one thing that's important, make sure you have a bank account just in your name. Make copies of joint tax returns. If you oversee the household and kids, keep track of monthly expenses, as this will be used in court to establish the amount of support. Most importantly, figure out what meaningful employment you might pursue, something that you're passionate about and that you can turn into a successful career. And maybe you don't want to have a big career and are happy with just the job, but what you will want to keep in mind is that if you want to be truly independent and build a life that you love, you will have to roll up your sleeves and put in the work it takes to become independent. Some women expect to receive support from their ex-husband for the rest of their lives,
Yeah.
and they will always be dependent on their ex-husband. And you got to ask yourself if that's really what you want out of life. True independence comes with rolling up your sleeves and putting in the work to build something for yourself. Some women believe they owe it to their children to stay home until the kids are off to college. You can still be an involved parent when you build a career, and your children will understand that you're working to take care of the family and yourself. If you always put yourself last and don't build anything for yourself for retirement, the burden you're trying to keep away from your children now will return to the children in their adult years, because they are going to be put in a position that they have to take care of you in retirement because you didn't do anything to save up for that.
Yeah.
And as challenging as it might be to work and single parent, it is doable, and it'll serve you and your children in the long run. That's what I would advise.
It's doable. It is exhausting. It is work. It is redefining what family means to you. You know, it's creating new support systems. It is all those little pieces. And I love where you highlighted true financial independence. Get on a little bit of a soapbox around child support payment, because again, it's an area that I think that the court is a little bit broken in, because people are able to abuse the system. And so if people are, you know that you're in a relationship and that person isn't fighting fair, and now you're asking the courts to be the parent, you're asking them to help things stay fair. And it's really too easy for people to abuse that situation. That's where I put that pressure back on the individual and say, do you really want to be living under his money? Like, do you really want to? My child support payment is still helpful, but it's small. It's not huge, right? And that's fine. And my goal since the very beginning was to get to a point where I never touch that money. That money, he's got to pay it. Great. It rolls straight into my son's college fund. I don't want to live off his money energetically. I don't want that tie or that bond anymore, because I highly doubt there are any people who are paying child support that are happily writing that check. Okay. So every single month, the withdrawal goes out or the check gets written or the transfer's done. You know that there's a little bit of like rah, 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 under their breath and grumbling and negative, hateful energy. It's their money. They're having to send it somewhere else, even though it goes to their kids, even though it enables their kids to live on the same thing. You know that that's the mindset, because I'd challenge you, if you were the one having to write money to somebody who did something that you didn't agree with, would you be happy about it? No. So I love to cut those energetic ties. I love to get to a place where I'm not bringing that money in, so that it's paying for rent or paying for whatever. It goes to my son, which is where child support should go. Child support should be there for the kids to support them being able to have a safe space and to have food and to have clothing. If you're owed child support, use that to become stable in your fears so that you can now go do something and create something and become independent of it. Because how amazing would that feel? How amazing would that feel to know that, like, you don't need that money. You can just move it into savings for the kids to use for college, which, by the way, would be really helpful, especially if you're restarting all your finances. You probably are not able to contribute to college funds and 401ks or investments like you had planned for a few years. And so get to the point where that becomes that makeup payment for it. I don't know. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, if I may add one more thing too, as you're speaking,
Sure.
what came to mind, I feel like since I've built my own business as a financial advisor, my relationship with my kids has improved a lot, because they're seeing that I'm an entrepreneur and that I'm building something, and it's just given them a new perspective and a new kind of respect. So it has really improved the relationship with my children quite a bit,
Yeah. I love
where
that.
they see I'm a lot more than a mom.
Right? I still remember my son was young, but like in the same day we had to install a new sink, replace a broken garbage disposal, change the flat tire on his bike, and whatever else. It was like a weekend. And I just remember him being like, he's like, "You can do that?" Yes. I can. Would it be great to have help? Yes, but yes, I can do it. I think it definitely changes the relationship that you have with your kids because they see it. They see how hard you're fighting. They see how unhappy you are, and they love both their parents and they want both
Mhm.
parents to be happy. And nobody wants a divorce. Nobody wants a
Right.
divorce, really. But sometimes it is the thing that frees up the space to be the right future, the right steps forward. Thank you, Claudia. Now, I didn't mention this yet, but Claudia is also an author. I don't know if you can you talk about your newest book yet that's coming out?
Oh, sure. Yes. My second book is On the Other Side. It's a woman's guide to rediscovering strength and success beyond adversity. And it's really intended to talk about what steps you can take when you have to get out of a toxic relationship or maybe a toxic workplace and you feel stuck. So, what do you do to get out and how do you stay resilient in the moment and create that success in the face of whatever adversity comes along? So, it's kind of a self help book with some useful tips, I think. So, hopefully, that'll be helpful for others to decide to roll up their sleeves.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Claudia, for sharing your story today. You guys, I will have the link for you to connect with Claudia or to grab her book in the show notes. It's also available on the crazyexwivesclub.com under episodes. All right, guys. And before we wrap up today, just again, a little bit of legal piece because she is a financial advisor. Let me reread the disclosure we started with. Discussions in this podcast should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. So thank you guys for hanging out through our little bit of legal start and stop. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us today. And until next week, you guys take care. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.